Hey Selectors, I'm Jack, and this is the Assist Line. Today, we're very lucky to have Nichole on with us, the winner of the Dallas Grand Prix, who piloted the new center, Audacity, from Blue Archive, all the way to victory. First of all, congratulations and well done, Nichole. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty good. It's been about a little bit over a week with since the GP, and yeah, feeling pretty good.
For those of you not in the know, the Dallas GP top two receive an invite to compete in the Mugen Shoujo World Cup in Japan. But today we are here to talk about the Dallas GP, how you won that big tournament. So let's get started. First of all, I've got your deck up on screen now. Why don't you give us a brief overview of what the deck is and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, before I say anything about this deck, shout out to Starfruit and Tetris for cooking this up for the four of us that took it to this event. That was me, Fatigue, Scob, and Starfruit himself.
As expected by the greats.
Yep. Me, Fatigued, and Scob got top 8, and Starfruit got top 16. So super happy. And so, yeah, Azusa is definitely a control, enter, deny, and hand rip deck, mostly focused on making consistently one hole every turn in order to deny as much resource as possible. To do this, it relies on, first of all, the strongest card in the deck, Hasumi, which has on attack instead of vanishing. It sends the Signy that it attacked into to the trash, denying the enter. When it's bonded, which is the unique Blue Archive mechanic, it does get +4, making it a 12k, meaning it can run into basically everything. So in case you can't make a hole, Hasumi is always there to just like shoot them down. When it comes to hand ripping, we have two big Signy, those being Hibiki and Momoi. Hibiki discards one if you have 3 Blue Archive on field. If you discarded a Blue Archive this turn, it discards another on attack. And Momoi is just like your level 2 8k monomine, like Falulu, for example.
Yeah, Falulu, that was the one I was thinking of.
In order to assist with this discard plan, we have 2 very strong options in our Lyric deck. We have the Ray Assist line, which when combined level 1 and level 2, draws you 3 and discards your opponent's hand at random 3 cards. And you have Madoka Dub, which when you play it, if you pay 1 blue enter, you can discard another card from your opponent's hand at random. Other things that make this deck work is because we have a main phase level 2 assist, we can get 6 limit 2/2/2 boards on turn 2, making it very hard for the opponent to open into, especially with the limited resource that they have. There is a lot of drawing in this deck through Madoka Float, the Ray Assists, as mentioned before, Madoka Dub, Chronos to make your draws consistent, because if you noticed, we're running only 9 level 1s. Tea Party, also for consistency. Azusa Bond is a pay 1, top check 3, add 1 of any card, including Servant. And Azusa's once per game is a top check 7, choose 2 to add to your hand. So this deck is all about consistency.
It definitely is. I see that. Now, sorry to interrupt. When you say 9 level 1s, you're not counting servants, right?
Not counting servants, correct.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. You'll notice that we are running 3 one-ofs, which is very uncommon, or running one-ofs is just pretty uncommon for a deck that doesn't salvage at all in general. But because we're able to dig through our deck so much, these one-ofs become very consistent, especially the Phalaris, which comes up in a lot of matchups. The last thing that I wanted to talk about are the changes that we made right before the GP. Tetris suggested both Mashiro and Mine. Mashiro being a level 1 3k that gives something else the same effect that Hasumi has, and Mine being like Sila, where the opponent, you can negate one of your opponent's Signy's effects when one of their Signy attack on their turn, and gives the lowest BA on your field plus 10k at the end of the turn. This is extremely important because it turns off Hasumi in the mirror by making things so big that she can't run over them, or by negating her on attack effect. Besides that, is there anything else that's super interesting? Oh yeah, Azusa herself. Her once per turn action is pay 1 white, 1 any in order to, depending on your life cloth, either trash or bounce one of your opponent's signy, which allows you to deal damage while still denying resource. And that's the main damage dealer in this deck, because besides that, we only have really 1, 2, 3 signy that deal damage, that being Mika, or 4 actually, that being Mika, Kazusa, Sakurako, and what's her name? Izuna. So yeah.
Yeah, easy enough.
I think that should be it for the deck profile. Oh wait, no. One last thing. To make your deck, to make your boards a lot stronger when it comes to defense, you do have Yuka, which prevents your blue archive signy from being removed from the field by discarding 2 cards, kind of like H2O. So they still can be -0, but if they're removed by like bouncing or like, for example, unrest, anything that doesn't minus will be able to be protected by Yuka. And yeah.
Yep, and that should do it for the deck, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is, at first glance, I think if you're a WIXOSS player, you think, okay, this is, blue, white, wall install, discard. We've kind of seen that throughout some of the metas, but there's a lot different about this deck. Blue Archive is a very different set. It's very strong, and it's got a lot of effects and perks that other sets just don't have when it comes to that strategy. I mean, you talked about Hasumi that trashes on attack, which, when you're talking about a resource denial game, trashing your opponent's signy when they're on the board versus not swinging into them, it's a big difference, because when you're trashing signy on the board, they have to replace them, which means less cards in their hand, which means your discard game is easier. It's just so powerful, especially at level 2.
Yeah, and then it brings up the question of, do I enter charge as well from hand? Because if you're getting trashed, 1, no enter, 2, no field, like you said. So it makes it a very difficult decision.
Yep, it just wears them so much more thin. Now, the other thing that's really amazing about this deck is, I could be wrong here, but I don't think I am. I think this is the first winning deck in an English GP to run a main phase only level 2 assist. Am I wrong on that?
I'm not quite sure, but it's definitely been pretty uncommon when it comes to deck building.
So, if you could, just elaborate on that a little bit. Why the main phase assist? Obviously, the discard and draw is very strong, but most people would kind of look at that, I think, and say, well, wow, that's, you're not running even a stop there. I mean, it is pretty uncommon. So if you could elaborate on that choice just a bit, when you were experimenting with the deck, did you experiment with running 2 different stops or put that in later, or what was the balancing act?
Sure, yeah. So our main decision-making through this Ray Assist was other lists, most lists for Azusa, if you look on resources such as WeCross Box, since there wasn't a GP for CPO2 format, the next GP was P15, which has the very powerful Hanrei Assist, which is a 2-stop. So we were a little like, we didn't really know where to go. We didn't really have anything to work off of at first, right? Because there's the option of replacing it with something like, say, Machina Smash.
I saw Machina Smash and a few other Azusa decks that day.
Yes, or some other 1-stop. But we figured that you do have the 1-stop signy barrier through one of your pieces, which is the Tea Party. And 2, it's so hard for your opponent to make holes anyway, that denying the resource for them to make the hole is defense in itself.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
If they can't recover... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just interjecting here. That is absolutely true. For cards in hand versus that, especially with the level 2 main phase, draw 2, discard 2 at random, your resources to open holes on a board, especially against Blue Archive, that can get so big and so hard to get between the shadow, the power, the trashing. It's just very difficult. So yeah, discard here is definitely a form of defense.
Exactly, yeah. One thing that I would like to mention is there was discussion about using Seminar, which is the Draw 4 Freeze Lyric Assist, which in some cases seems better when you just view it in a vacuum. However, when paired with the Ray Assist, that Draw 4 ends up giving you so much hand that you're usually going to discard it anyway for hand size. And the Freeze Lyric means that you might just have a servant in your hand that's just sitting there. So if you have that servant in your hand that's just sitting there, it means that you didn't really stop any at all.
No, that's absolutely true. Drawing too many cards is not a bad problem to have, in a lot of decks. But when you're talking about a deck that's very competitive, that wants to maximize every card it draws, that's absolutely the case. You don't want to overdraw. You want to make sure you're maximizing the resources in your hand, and the choice of Tea Party versus Seminar is very understandable in that regard.
Mm. And the last thing about the main phase assist is, like I said, the 6 limit on turn 2. One of the strongest decks at this GP besides this deck was definitely Fuon Nanashi Unrest Nanashi.
Right.
And the reason that deck is so strong, besides Hedonym just being an insanely busted card, is because it's able to get so much value out of those viruses. And if you have boards like 3 Hasumi or 2 Hasumi, 1 Momoi, as they're going into their turn 3, it makes that minus 3,000 a lot less relevant, especially because they're not running Firecracker. So that Momoi being 8k minus the 3k does not really mean anything.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, against Nanashi, in any given WIXOSS matchup, you might expect going into level 3 to have a limit of around 7, 3-1-1, 3-2-1 for your assists. You have to assemble a board of 2 level 3s and a level 1, and that level 1 is going to be vulnerable pretty much no matter what you do. And getting to bypass that with a 6 limit on turn 2 deck, that's just so powerful into something like Nanashi.
Correct, yeah. And that's why when paired with Dub, it's extra powerful, because in a lot of cases, you would just use Dub as soon as possible to get that 8th limit so that you can have 3-3-2 boards in order just to make Nanashi's life way harder.
Yep, makes perfect sense. All right, well, I think that does it for the deck overview, so a few more basic questions about it. For this particular deck, do you think it has any bad matchups? Anything it has trouble with?
Starfruit, if he hears this, is probably going to say that I'm plagiarizing him, but I would say that the Nanashi matchup can be a little difficult just because they're able to refill their board so easily, even though it does cost like a black enter to use Hedonym, which is why I think Nanashi is the strongest deck in the format, but it's not as consistent as this deck, which is the main reason the 4 of us that did use it decided to bring it.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because Nanashi can easily refill resource if she bursts well, because of all of her bursts being salvage bursts, because you have the Hedonym itself, you have your servant bursts, you have your Kago Mecha bursts, and you have your Pale Lobby burst, which lets you draw 2. Any other bad matchups? The mirror itself is, I can't say that it's a bad matchup, obviously, because it's the mirror.
Well, the mirror is a very different animal than any other matchup. It's got its own challenges.
Yeah. It's definitely played differently than any other of her matchups. For example, you end up holding Ray instead of just blitzing it at turn 2. But the mirror can be a very bad matchup if you just draw badly at the start. For example, one of my matchups in Swiss was me versus Scob. This was round 3, and he went second, and I saw basically all of my very powerful cards, my Hibikis, my Yukas, at the start of the game. And when I was basically near the middle or the end, I was only drawing into my level 1s, which really, really couldn't compete with the really high end of this deck.
Yeah, if you've got 2 people piloting the exact same deck, even if it's not exactly the same, of similar skill level, the person that draws better is just going to win most of the time. It's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah. But besides that, I would say this deck pretty easily beats every other deck in this format besides Nanashi. And there are two more that we didn't get too much, or well, there's one more that we got a lot of data on, which was Denombu. Denombu is a high resource gain deck, and they gain their resource during their turn, not by keeping it over time. So even if you discard them down to 0, they'll draw a bunch during their turn and then have that resource to spend. So that matchup can be a little tricky. And in that same vein, one matchup that we did test, but not very much, was Dissonant Luke, who basically does the same thing. The issue with both of these matchups is that they are very reliant on their powerful resource gain signy. In Denombu's case, it's Futaba, and in Pri's case, it's Save. And if they do not see these signy, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, and even if they see them, it's very hard to hold them against a deck with such aggressive discard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums up the deck's matchups, and in a way, it sums up my next question, which was, what were you mainly expecting to see at Dallas? And from that, I'm getting, like, you expected to see Azusa, you expected to see Nanashi, you expected to see Denonbu. Any other big ones?
I personally have a lot of belief in Neru, though I don't think this deck loses to that deck in the slightest. I'm not quite sure how many Nerus there were, but I don't think there were that many.
I can say with confidence there were at least 2. I played the deck twice that day, so I can tell you there were at least 2.
I think, yeah. I think there might have been at least 3, but like I said, not too many.
Yeah, Neru, I experimented with that deck just a little bit. It is very difficult to pile in, and it can be kind of inconsistent, especially into something with such consistency as Azusa. It's hard. Azusa, in general, no matter what deck you're playing, is a very difficult deck to play into, and by design, and it's very good at it. So again,
yeah,
congratulations on winning the GP, and fantastic job brewing such an absolute monster with Blue Archive.
Thank you. Yeah, no, again, I have to give all the credit to Tetris and Starfruit. They're the master chefs. I really wouldn't have been able to do it without any of them. And same for the other people that use this list. We all got together and helped test this deck. The biggest changes we ended up making were a lot of lists were running Tsukuyo and Tsurugi. Tsukuyo being a very powerful turn 1 7k enter outlet, and Tsurugi being guard salvage. But yeah, through our testing, we figured out that they weren't good. So thank you so much to everyone in my group for helping me make this list.
Well, teamwork makes the dream work, and that's the beautiful thing. So with the deck overview, the GP overview, why don't we get into the rounds if you're up for that? Tell us about how your rounds went. There were 7 and then 3 rounds of Top Cuts. So if you're game, why don't we just go through the day and how you experienced it?
For sure. Yeah. I saw so many Azusa and Dissonant Nanashis. It was ridiculous. First round was Azusa, and I could immediately tell that this person that was sitting across the table from me was building around P15 meta using a P15 list, because the choices when it came to the level 1s were very similar to the Hanrei lists that we saw, such as using Koyuki, which is the level 1 random monomine. But the assist that they were using instead of Hanrei was Mel, and they frankly just couldn't get... Wait, I think it was Mel. I might be misremembering. All I remember is that they were not able to afford both their assists and to keep up with my game plan. And I believe any deck that's not running the Ray assist just automatically loses, or any Azusa deck that's not running the Ray assist just automatically loses in the mirror.
That's very true.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just interjecting here. No, that's very likely true. I mean, it sounds like your opponent might have been playing a 3-stop, and any 3-stop for Blue Archive period is very difficult because you just don't have access to some of the enter generation that, like, say, the Desona package does, unless you're like on pure green, and you don't have access to Xeno. If you get enter burned out of it, you can just lose the game if you can't play your second assist in that term. So yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Correct. Yeah. And they were running Seminar, I believe. Wow, I've forgotten so much, which allowed them to draw 4, but it just wasn't enough because my Ray Assist just -3 them so easily.
Yeah, it's just not going to get there.
Yep, it's just not enough. Next is II. This matchup was a wash. Wasn't able to use their second piece, wasn't able to use their second assist or their second level 2 assist. Spent a bunch of enter just on their Resina and then got choked out and died. Nothing super interesting.
Yeah, II is kind of a resource-intensive deck and doesn't have a lot of great ways to get cards, especially if it's starved out, so not too surprising there. RIP II.
Rip. Yeah. It's super cool if you can get off like a bajillion damage turn, but if you can't, it's like kind of does nothing else. My third matchup was against my friend Scob. So this was the mirror. Like I said, this is one of the games that I did lose at GP. Not much to say here, except our group definitely thought that going first was better for Azusa. After adding Mashiro and Mine, we weren't sure if that changed. And Scob going second and beating me is definitely, it adds to the data that we have, which I'll talk about a little bit more in my top 8 games.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when you look at this deck at first glance and you think about a mirror match, you would think that the person who's able to lay down Hasmi first, the person that's able to lay down Hibiki first, is just going to have a massive advantage. But there's a lot more nuance to it than that, and that's kind of what makes the great players great. So fantastic job to both of you in that round.
Correct, yeah. My next round after lunch, I wasn't feeling too great after losing, but my next round was against Denombu. And I remember this game being very close. The saving grace is that I knew what my last cloth was after refreshing. And instead of instead of being unsure and putting down a Yuka and maybe denying myself a hole, right? Because putting down the Yuka is in and of itself taking up the opportunity cost of having something that could actually do damage. I knew that my last cloth was Hasumi, so I was able to just go completely aggro on that last turn and not die because I had the Hasumi burst.
Yep, count your discard pile, people. It is important.
Yep. It was definitely a last cloth situation, though.
Yeah, the opportunity cost you mentioned there, that's definitely one of the big terms that come to mind with defensive Signy like Yuka, and being able to read your bursts like that let you use those cards so much more effectively.
Correct, yeah. Next round was against another Azusa. This Azusa was actually on the Ray Assist as well, but unfortunately was still on Tsukuyo and some other Signy that, or I think it was like 2 of Izuna, just like the ratios were off and some of the tech choices were off. And there were unfortunately some misplays on their end. I just believe that it was, it's nerves. It's a big event.
Oh, trust me, I know about the nerves. Second round against Starfruit might have been the most embarrassing game I've ever played in my life. But, it gets to all of us.
Yeah, it sure does. So right now we're at 4 wins and 1 loss against Azusa. Going into round 6, this is my second loss. This is against Bubble Nanashi. Now, this game, Bubble joked about double refreshing me a few times, and I joked back about it. And the last turn interaction was me putting down a Yuka, having 1 cloth left, and having no servant in hand. Bubble had very little resource, but he top decked into the hedonym and summoned another hedonym after asking me how many cards were in my deck. And I realized, oh shit, I have 7 cards in my deck.
Yeah, Hedonym can just come and have that refresh out of nowhere. That's part of what makes that card so busted.
Yeah, so I actually did end up losing to the double refresh because I got my last cloth refreshed, even though there were no holes made, and then just Lurig swing to the face took it.
Hate to see it.
Hate to see it. And then my last round in Swiss was another Dissonant Nanashi. This wasn't too eventful. It was just usually in this matchup, you want to hold Unrest for resource gain purposes rather than like popping it early. So you want to hold it for when you want to make a hole on something that's a little difficult to make a hole, like a 12K or something, and you want that draw 2 to be very useful. So if you don't hold the Unrest and you pop it early like you would in other matchups, you do just kind of get run over through lack of resource.
Yep, and that's going to be matchup knowledge, which, considering Blue Archive came out only weeks before the GP, getting that kind of matchup knowledge is only going to come through the most rigorous of testing.
For sure, yeah. And shout out to Dusel for getting me my Blue Archive playset even before last GP. That definitely helped out.
Yeah, shout out to Dusel, big voice in the community.
Japanese playset, by the way.
Right.
And with 5 wins and 2 losses, we move on to top 8. Round 1 of top 8 was versus Skob again. In this case, it was just the opposite situation. Since I was seated last in top 8, I did go second every game. And this mirror, again, going second, I did win. The player going second did win. So I'll talk about it at the end, why that might happen. But yeah, Skob just kind of got draw diffed. I did see his bursts, and since I knew his list perfectly, I knew that when I saw 4 Yuka and 4 Yuka and 2 Mine in his trash, I knew he didn't have any upbursts. So even though I didn't draw into any Hasumi or Mashiro, I was able to just not swing into the opposing Signy unless I had a hole, because I wasn't scared of it getting removed. Besides that, I also did draw diff him. The same thing that happened to me in round 3. He saw a lot of his powerful Signy early, which he had to discard and enter charge and whatnot. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. I hate team kills.
We all do. And, we all hate getting draw diff too, but unless you're playing an absolute no RNG game like chess, it's just going to happen.
Yep. Going into my second round in top 8 was Bubble again. So this is I fought.
So you've played 2 rematches this day.
Yeah, 2 rematches, and both of them were my losses, which was pretty funny.
That's incredible.
Yeah. During this game, it was pretty. I was a lot better at denying resource, and by the time that I got him down to, I believe it was 3 cloth. Yeah, 3 cloth. It was basically over. I did have a super aggro turn where I did Phalaris to refresh his trash so that he couldn't toolbox with Hedonym anymore. And then I just did 2 more damage. He did still have his assist up, but he had to gamble between, do I use my assist and lose next turn because I won't have any resources to threaten her next turn? Or do I just gamble on life bursts? I ended up reading his life bursts, and it was so late in the day that we both discussed each other's life bursts just outwardly in front of each other because we both knew what was happening. I noticed that he had 2 Hedonyms left, a Servant left, and 2 Hedonyms, a Servant, and any combination of Kagomecha and Pelabi, because I wasn't sure what he was what he was running. But after I refreshed him with the Phalaris, I saw both of those hedonyms and that servant enter the trash. And the refresh cloth was the Koggle Mecha, so I wasn't afraid to just swing in as much as possible without fear of any resource gain.
Yep, getting that burst read is so powerful.
Yeah, and he did actually sack into drawing a servant off of his last cloth, so he did live, and he did have a lot of enter. However, I was at 3 cloth still, and no holes could be made because he just didn't draw into the right stuff. So I was a lot more aware of how to use Phalaris to deny Nanashi's game plan in this game, or well, every game except for top 6, or except for round 6 of my pools. But yeah, it can be a bit of a difficult matchup if you don't see Hedonym, for sure.
Well, that leaves the last round of Top Cut, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, so the only team kill I'm not upset about, me versus Fatigued, also known as Tim. Tim is, I'm very happy that he got second place, that he was able to make it to finals, because Tim is literally the person that gave me my first WIXOSS card a year ago. We're both Seattle locals. He's become one of my best friends in the area. Yeah, no, I'm just really happy that he was able to make it. The game itself was faster than any other game that I played that day, besides the II game, because I think we were just playing at an optimal level, just putting down optimal boards. We both knew what each other what was doing, and unfortunately, we both did know that I won by like halfway through the game, just looking at the resources, looking at what he still has left in his deck, etc., so on and so forth. But yeah, no, I'm super happy. I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Well, we all love to see our locals and our friends go into the Top Cut, and we also love to see connections being made in the community like that. Also worth mentioning from that little bit, going from your first WIXOSS card a year ago to being invited to compete in Japan with the Mugen Shoujo Cup. Again, congratulations and very well done.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a crazy journey. Definitely Tetris, Alex, is the best teacher I could have asked for. Straight up. He brought me from not knowing how to play the game at all last November to where I am now. So I definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without him or anyone in my friend group.
Well, if I might ask, actually, before you played WIXOSS, did you play any other card games?
I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Very casually, just because I grew up with it, and then I played Master Duel a bit, but like, no, I wouldn't say I really played any other card games.
So yeah, coming even into this without too much experience in the competitive level with card games, and again, going from starting a year ago to winning a big tournament like this is just very impressive. So once more, congratulations and very well done.
Yeah, thank you so much. I definitely think that regardless of the medium or the format, learning how to learn in a competitive setting is very important. I am a competitive fighting game player in my chosen game, which is Melty Blood. Go sign up for Frosty Fastings and come over. But yeah, so I believe regardless of what you're doing, if you know how to learn, if you know how to look at your mistakes and improve, if you know how to play games with the intent of learning, you can improve really fast at anything that you're trying to do.
Well, that's very solid advice for anyone doing just about anything. You know, don't let it go, don't quit immediately, practice, get better, learn from your mistakes, and even though it might be a slog, it's probably worth it.
Yep.
All right, well, that's the GP journey. Just a few look back questions now. With the experience you got at the GP and, you know, obviously playing the tournament you did, do you think the deck as it is the best it is, or would you have made any changes looking back?
The deck list itself, I would not make any changes. This deck is absolutely ridiculous. We put so much testing into it. Um, After seeing how it performed at GP, I don't think I would have changed it at all.
That's fantastic to hear. So that said, obviously now that it's out there and the sauce is kind of public, I imagine a lot of people will look at this deck list and try to pick it up. Do you have any tips for those people that are kind of learning this deck new after it came to prominence?
Yeah, this deck, while it does seem very straightforward, just deny your opponent as much resource as possible, does have to does have a lot to do with macro decisions. It actually is very difficult just because it requires you to know what your opponent wants and what they can do in their deck. Um, to deny that specific resource at that time, or for example, like I said, use the one of Valorous to remove their trash in order to stop them from refreshing, or in order to stop them from salvaging, or maybe not using the Valorous in order to look, or because you looked at their trash and they're only drawing into bad cards, stuff like that. Knowing when to really put down like your resource gain, which is Azusa, or your assists, versus when to force aggro, because it seems like, oh, if you just do one lane per turn, you'll win. But sometimes forcing the open three is better than just stalling it out. So I would say be very mindful of what your opponent can do. Think about what ways they have to break your board. Think about what resources that will take, and then think about how you can get the Signy on your field to deny those specific resources. Like, versus a deck that like draws a lot, I'm not going to focus so much on discarding as I am uh starving enter. So, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, this is a control and starvation deck. And when you're playing those kinds of decks, deck knowledge of your opponent and deck knowledge of what's generally good right now is very important. So, would you say that anyone who's trying to learn this Ozza deck is probably going to have to learn a few others while they're at it?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Part of the reason I feel so comfortable in against like most powerful decks is because I just play a bunch of decks. I just try them out, even though I don't really end up playing them competitively. I just try them out, see what like I need here, see what thought processes go into playing this deck versus this deck, and how to really get it in my opponent's head.
Yep, and that is the kind of testing, understanding, and practice that it's going to take to win the day and go to Japan. So, final words here. We've gone through the GP, we've gone through the deck, we've gone through a few look back questions and some general tips and tricks for this very powerful deck that just hit the scene. Just one more question I have for you, Nichole. When you're not playing Azusa, who's your favorite Elrig?
Who's my favorite lyric? Okay, I have two. Earth is definitely one of my favorites. I entered my first GP with her back in March at Florida. However, she's just feels too weak right now. I have cooked up some lists with her, and I have been helping out in the community. If people come up, like, feel free to DM me if you have like any questions about any decks that I play or I'm interested in, because most likely I'll have like tested them or tried to build something. My other lyric that I like is Hanare. She is my main AS deck. Unfortunately, I'm still holding out hope for Hanare in 24 format, just because she hasn't really been playable at all throughout all of Diva. But yeah, no, definitely those two.
Earth and Honore, you heard it here first. Well, I guess that means we're going to close up the interview. Once again, Nichole, I know I've said it a lot during this interview, but again, it's worth repeating. Very well done. Congratulations. I hope you do fantastic in the Mugen Shoujo Cup. And thank you so much for coming on, telling us about this deck, telling us about your GP experience, and being very generous and sharing some tips and tricks for the people who look at this deck now and think to themselves, maybe I could play that. So thank you once again.
Yeah, no, thank you. like I said, if anyone is interested in Azusa or like any other deck that I might be interested that I play, feel free to DM me on Discord. I'm always willing to help anyone. Yeah.
Well, we do love the openness, the generosity, and the just great temper of the WIXOSS community. The games community is one of the main things that drew me to it, honestly. So seeing that kind of continued in tradition, that's great to see. Well, I will let you go, Nichole, and for you selectors at home, thanks for tuning in, and I hope that was a great interview for you.
Be sure to look out for us at Mugen Shoujo. We already have a very powerful group of players that even if they didn't qualify, they're helping us prep and test. So yeah, be sure to look out for us there. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling the assist line. The WIXOSS media you requested is complete. However, please stay on the line for more content. To subscribe and receive more WIXOSS content, please press the subscribe button on your screen now. The assist line values your feedback and encourages you to leave your comments in the indicated section. To repeat this media, press the replay button on your device.